Mhm.
Hi, everyone. This is Scott Nybakken for Dynamite Comics, and I'm here with Emmy Award-nominated writer Daniel Kibblesmith to talk about his new Darkwing Duck series coming to stores in February. Daniel, thanks for joining us on the channel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this.
So to begin at the beginning, I believe you were exactly the target audience for Darkwing Duck when the original animated show first aired back in the '90s. Can you confirm that? And,
Yeah, I can definitely confirm
and
that.
if so, what was its effect on you as an impressionable youth?
Massive, massive. Yeah, I must have been like 9, 10, 11, something when that came out, and it was seismic. It was the only thing anybody was talking on the playground next day. I was wrapping blankets around my neck and jumping off of furniture. It was perfect for me at that age, especially because I loved the comedy cartoons, that I grew up watching, like the DuckTales and all the Saturday morning stuff. And the sort of 90s pivot to action hadn't really happened yet. There was always, G.I. Joe and Transformers and stuff like that, but you didn't yet have, your X-Men, the animated series, your Spider-Man shows. And I very much loved the comedy of cartoons, but the action parts were still a little like, oh, I don't know. I'm a soft little baby kid. I don't know if this is for me. And Darkwing Duck was comedy, action. It taught me the language of superheroes. It was pulp. It had this crazy, 1940s like Art Deco feel around the same time as Batman the Animated Series, but it didn't take itself super seriously in the same way. And yeah, it had this incredible rogues gallery, like this kind of unparalleled rogues gallery in superhero animation that I would put up there with anything from the comics. So yeah, it was huge for me. My favorite show. VHS taped it, every time.
And like since the animated show, like Darkwing went on to have quite a few comic book adventures, including a recent run here at Dynamite. Were you reading any of those titles as they came out or after they came out?
The
And
one I was reading as it came out was the most recent one at Dynamite because that was the first one that I really had access to. I know that they kind of dip in and out of publication, but when we started talking about this series, I went back and did all of them. I also great opportunity to say support your local library because if you're looking for out of print comics, I was able to get some of the Darkwing stuff from Interlibrary Loan.
ah,
So yeah, I've read I think everything that is available, and yeah, they're great. I mean, he's a superhero. He works great in comics.
and like without getting too far into like spoiler territory, can you give us an overview of the plot for the first few issues of your new series? And
Yes.
yeah, and and also like I wanted to ask about how many of the Darkwing's great supporting cast of allies, irritants, and antagonists can we expect to see?
I love irritants. There's definitely some irritants in there. Like, Herb Muddlefoot is obviously an irritant. He's a great example. Everybody, because I'm such a big fan that I went back and I read all of the Darkwing Duck comics that have come out over the years. From the different publishers and like old Disney Adventures stuff, and the things that are starting to get collected in those big Fantagraphic hardcovers and the most recent Dynamite run. And I love them, and they were really inspiring. But one thing that I noticed is that those writers, and I think this was really smart, those writers all took an opportunity to really make this feel more like a comic book and less like an episodic TV show. So once I read all that and realized all that, I was like, okay, so that's kind of been done. Like we've used the strengths of the comic book medium to say, what would a serialized Darkwing Duck story be like? And, how do we change the pacing of a Darkwing Duck story? So my approach is completely back to basics. Every issue is basically one like lost episode of the Darkwing Duck show, beginning, middle, and end. A plot involving a classic villain with all of the supporting casts that we, obviously grew up loving if you're roughly my age. So obviously Goslin is there, Launchpad is there, Honker is there, and every issue, which I really, really, I also write television animation. So I'm really trying to make every issue feel like one new episode of Darkwing Duck. So each issue is devoted to a classic villain or like team ups of classic villains that we've never seen before. But that was my approach going in, was to just like, what if we were bringing back the Darkwing Duck 90s show right now? How would we try to write that?
Yeah, and you touched on this a little bit just now, that you've written for a wide range of media, including mainstream comics, as well as mass market book publishing and television, and in all of the internet gadfly spaces as well. Uh, how do you
Correct.
how do you think your varied experiences have affected your approach to writing a title like Darkwing Duck?
That's a great question. I mean, almost everything that I've done has been some kind of legacy brand. I think that my career has given me a huge amount of experience in learning a voice, internalizing the voice, doing a lot of work for hire, being really protective of the characters, keeping them true to themselves, make sure they sound like themselves when they talk, and that they're demonstrating what people love about them. I think that when you're given the keys to the kingdom like this, I think you have a lot of responsibility to sort of maintain a contract with the audience and not break their favorite thing, but bring enough new stuff to it and enough of your own personality and experience as a writer to it that you can give them a new and surprising experience that is still true to the property that they love. And I really feel like that was the case when I worked at Marvel, doing things like Loki. I felt like that when I worked at the Colbert Show, because he has an audience that he brings with him that is much bigger than me, and I have a responsibility to make sure that the show always sounds like the show. When I worked at the Onion, obviously that voice is like airtight. You always have to sound like the Onion. So I've had a lot of experience, kind of being a huge fan of things and just banging on the door until they let me in, and promising to to do frankly an insane amount of homework every time. Like research is the other really fun part of my job, and making sure that I absorb everything, and that when I sit down to say Launchpad says this, it sounds like something Launchpad would say.
Yeah. And related to that, what are some of your favorite comic book superhero tropes or plot devices? And will we be seeing any of them played out on the streets of Saint Canard?
That is also a great question. I mean, because Darkwing Duck is a half-hour animated show, it is like full of tropes. As a writer, I don't think a lot about tropes usually. I'm really interested in the characters and what they want and need, and the way that that can create a plot, rather than going onto the shelf and taking off like a familiar convention. Darkwing Duck is the exception. Darkwing Duck is going to be extremely tropey, because it's a half hour. I'm trying to write it like a half hour weekday cartoon show. And that is a genre that really created, and I think also excels when it's doing these sort of familiar, exciting kind of genre-based tropes. So I was on my way to Comic-Con with some friends who work in animation, and they were talking about like, oh, we're doing all the tropes in this show. First they get shrunk, and then they go into cyberspace. And I heard that, and I didn't say it at the time, but I was quietly thinking like, well, that's issue 4 and issue 5. So I
Yes,
didn't
yes.
I didn't necessarily set out to write something really tropey, but now that I've really embraced it, I think Darkwing Duck is probably going to be the tropiest thing I've ever written. So if there's a existing concept or plot that you want to see a mashup of particular characters go through particular machinations, I really, really hope that this series delivers for you.
Excellent. And finally, like this new series will be illustrated by Ted Brandt and Rose Stein, with whom you've collaborated before. And it will also feature covers by Tad Stones, the creator of the original animated series. So here's the Sophie's Choice for you. Who are you more excited to be working with on Darkwing Duck?
I hate this question. Um, obviously I'm floored that Tad is involved. I've gushed so much during this interview about being a big fan of the show, and what that also means is just being a colossal fan of Tad. That his vision for this thing, and his understanding of what makes it work, and his ability to articulate that understanding to collaborators is so staggering and so important in making something really good and really special and really authentic, because that's what we're going for. We want it to feel like the show. So I am very, very humbled by that. The Brantenstein team, huge fans. I've been reading their stuff since I discovered them on the Crowded series, which is just a great like near future sci-fi comic satire. Really recommend people check it out. And they did some work in the illustrated book of DC Comics Christmas Carols that we put out a couple years ago, which is really crazy. But it's December 9th right now, so if anybody's looking for like a very funny stocking stuffer for comic book fans, that exists. But yeah, Sophie's Choice, I got to pick Tad because it's Darkwing. Like I absolutely would have worked on Brantenstein, like worked with Brantenstein at like the first opportunity. Like we would have come up with like a creator owned or done another like illustrated book or something. Like I could have figured out something with them. But like doing Darkwing with Tad Stones doing covers, like getting that sort of like tacit stamp of approval, and getting to pick his brain about this so that we can make sure that it feels right, just beyond invaluable.
And that is in fact the correct answer.
I didn't know that Sophie's Choices had correct answers.
A little known fact.
That was like a Kobayashi Maru situation where you're just screwed.
Daniel, thank you for joining us, and thanks to everyone for watching. Darkwing Duck #1 will be in stores in February, so be sure to pre-order it now. And follow Dynamite Comics on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X to hear more about all of our upcoming titles.